Joint presentation by the Little Ship Club and the Royal Institute of Navigation, and we're delighted to have tonight the author of the Antares charts, Bob Bradfield, who will be talking to us about the Scottish charting. Over to you. Thank you very much indeed, Bob.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for coming to listen to what I have to say. I'm going to take it at quite a speed because you've only allowed me 45 minutes. I normally prattle on for a bit longer. With that in mind, perhaps we can keep questions for the end, but please do come up with lots of questions, but we'll deal with them at the end if that's okay. Now, can I just ask, show of hands, does anybody keep a boat in Scotland? I know there's at least only one of you. Sailed in Scotland at all? Yep, a lot, most of you.
Going to.
And you're going to wonder why I'm asking this question, but does anybody have a trailer sailor that they might consider taking to Scotland? One, excellent, excellent. It's an up-and-coming thing, and I'm doing some charts especially for you, sir. Great. Right, well, with that in mind, you might wonder why we have a picture here of the Antarctic. I grew up near Cambridge, and I worked initially in London. I was a member, actually, of the Little Ship Club years ago, and I'm also a member of the Royal Institute of Navigation, which I'm proud to wear my ruby badge today. So I sailed then on the east coast, the south coast, continent, Brittany, Holland, and so on, the Baltic. When I retired, I started doing more long-distance stuff, the Arctic, the Antarctic, around the top of Australia, all sorts of exciting places. But then I rediscovered Scotland, and I thought, well, why on earth do I go to all these other places? It is just such a wonderful place to sail, especially if you can choose your weather. And being retired, if you keep your diary clear, you can. You jump in the car, even near Cambridge, and you can be on the boat in Scotland the same day. So anyway, this is where it all started, our trip to the Antarctic 2004-05. You have to anchor in some grubby little bays so the ice goes aground before it gets to you. So there were challenges. But first of all, this is the Arctic, the walrus, the polar bear, the polar ice cap, and some of the more spectacular scenery in the Antarctic. The slide you've just seen, this was one of the less good anchorages, but there were quite a lot like that, and the diagrams for them were really not up to fit for purpose. Better than nothing, a lot better than nothing, but this is Paradise Harbour, and this is where I thought, well, this diagram is not good enough, we need to do better. There's a big spit that comes out from this side, there's a shorter spit that comes out from that side, and somewhere in the middle is a channel, which is not very deep, and it's not very wide. And we just sort of clipped this edge of it as we came in. I thought, well, can't be rocket science. Of course it is, because it uses GPS, which I guess is rocket science. But so I just got a bit of graph paper, a handheld GPS, a handheld depth sounder, and I just worked out where the centre of the channel was, got the position, and put a route on the plotter on the boat. We just followed the route out, easy. I didn't need to worry about depths or anything like that, but it just gave me sort of feel that perhaps there is something useful that can be done. So that was the first chart. That was quite a long time ago. Why Scotland? Well, as I've explained, it's close to home and it is very varied. It's a huge area, really quite sheltered from anything serious, ocean swell-wise. Lots of variety, lots of very different sub-areas, an awful lot of anchorages. I mean, I've done 600 already. I've got a list of 200 and I haven't tried. I know I could find 1,000 if I put my mind to it. So I think it's a simply wonderful place, especially if you can choose your weather. And just to give you a very quick flavour, on a nice day, there's just absolutely nothing like it. That's Ardnamurchan Point, westernmost point of the UK mainland, a typical beautiful sandy beach, a massive sandy beach that's south of Barra on Mingulay at the bottom of the Outer Hebrides. Yes, it wasn't that warm. We were sort of, you can see, we were slightly wrapped up. You can see there's a bit of a breeze, but some trader sailors, and that's us out there at anchor. Quite a lot of local wildlife, basking shark, dolphins, of course, but you see them in lots of places. Puffins are incredibly tame. The Coolin Hills, Loch Scavaig, which I'll talk about in a moment, tucked away in there, really dramatic scenery, if that's what you're looking for. Plenty of opportunity for exercise. And should you work up a real thirst, where there are a very large number of distilleries, and this, if you need to cool off a bit, then there are opportunities for doing that. This was Antares, my old gaff, old wooden gaffer, which I had when I started the project. Lovely boat, great for having lots of kit and lots of dinghies on board, but it needed a crew, typically, well, a minimum really of 4 fully participating adults, not a single winch on that boat. So what were they going to do when I was surveying? So I parted company with her, and I bought a rather more practical motorboat, which I used to get to where I'm going to do the survey, and then the survey is done from a rubber dinghy, and I'll show you more of that shortly. So my hypothesis is that Scotland's channels and anchorage are largely uncharted, by which I mean that they're only charted if there's a chart that is suitable for your purposes. Now, if you want to go from Malay to Loch Boisdale in the Outer Hebrides, well, the Admiralty published perfectly good charts for that, don't need any help from me. But if you want to go into a little anchorage where the greatest depth is 5 metres and there's lots of rocks cluttering it, then you do need help. The official charts are no use at all. And it is mainly a question of scale. There are things missing from the official charts, but really it is just that the scale is inadequate. It's like going for a walk in the countryside with an AA road atlas. It's as bad as that in places. So I mentioned Loch Scavaig earlier on, the Coolin Hills there, and you saw a picture of Antares anchored here in Loch Moidart. We were wanting to travel between the two, quite a significant distance. There wasn't time to do it before dark, and you don't really want to go into Moidart without one of my charts anyway, in the dark. So we wanted somewhere to stop. We stopped there at Taskavaig, which got a very small write-up in the pilot book. This is the pilot book. The sketch is taken from a very old Admiralty survey, but the bottom is clean sand, and any danger should be visible if approached with due caution. So we had a northeasterly wind, quite a brisk breeze. Those two rocks, 200 metres apart, roughly a cable apart, I thought I could easily get that right. So in we went, we anchored, we had a lovely evening, quite a bit of whiskey, lovely views out over the Coolins. In the morning, the wind had gone. We could see straight down through the water. The rocks, not sand or mud, but rocks, looked as if they were just below the surface. You know, everything's foreshortened as you look into the water. We should have been harder ground, but because things were foreshortened, we weren't quite. But there wasn't a lot of room to play with. That really gave me quite a turn, and it made me think, you know, should I be having a go at doing something about it? So that was the genesis of the project, if you like. There's a bit more detail here. It's a very big bay. It's about half a mile across at the mouth. That area obviously is a small part of it. That's the Admiralty chart. This is my chart. So that rock is that one. That rock is that one. In between is another rock. It's quite deep, 2.6 metres. But Antares draws 2.2, and at low water there's a clearance, but only just. And I was expecting a nice sandy bottom, and when we went in, there was too much wind to see the bottom, but the depth sounder didn't give us any cause for alarm. We anchored with a northeasterly wind, and we fell back to about there. So anyway, that was about the wake-up call. So sadly, Taskavaig was just one of literally hundreds of examples where the official charts, just not up to purpose. Another example, a lovely example here on muck. These are the small isles, rum, egg and muck. The camera is just off the screen. There's got Void Art again, which I mentioned earlier. Galanack Bay on the north of Muck, beautiful, beautiful spot. The only way in, using the pilot book, the stone wall that is conspicuous on the skyline, keep it in line with the highest point of the barn with the red curved roof. Well, you know, that's great on a nice day, nice sunny day. Well, I told you that Scotland's always nice. Well, actually, that's a bit of a porcupine because it isn't always. If it's a misty day, foggy day, then that could be tricky. If it's a night, clearly that's very tricky. So that is the best that was available. These were the charts that were available. This is the Admiralty chart. That is the line, leading line, half a mile of it, using the dry stone wall and the red roofed barn. Doesn't give you a lot of confidence as you go in looking with your electronic plotter. It takes you straight over the Bowhound Reef. This is my chart, which I did later, a couple of years later. The leading line is just perfect, couldn't be better. So what a difference. And here you can see that this is where you're supposed to anchor, but it looks like a very, very small anchorage. In fact, it's quite a decent size, and there's only one very compact rock there, which is not too difficult to avoid. So you can already see that there's quite a lot of advantage to having the larger scale. I found an awful lot of permanently covered rocks. I brought them all to the Admiralty. They put the more significant ones on the official charts. I've only ever found one drying rock, and this is it. But again, it gave me the fright of my life because I was steering straight towards it at 6 knots on autopilot, and I just happened to look up. And I saw this rock, which is actually 2.3 meters drying, when it said 5.2 meters deep. 2.3 meters is a lot, top of my hand. And it's from here to the curtain over there. Imagine that coming charging towards you at 6 knots. It'll probably give most of you a fright. So that was scary. That is the only one I found. But this is another really scary one. This is in the Firth of Clyde, just off the Hunterston power station, the Hunterston nuclear power station. It's a bay that is much used by people at weekends. Bottom end here, this is the Admiralty chart, sounding at 5.2 meters. Exactly where it says 5.2, it's actually only 0.7. I am staggered that that wasn't found by somebody and reported to the Admiralty. People are not very good at reporting things they find. They just say, oh bother, that's all my fault. I'll just get it repaired and carry on. But the Admiralty, the Hydrographic Office, is quite responsive if you tell them. And that's one that's certainly been picked up. 1985 survey. I reckon I could have, if I'd gone into hydrographic survey, I could have been the surveyor in charge on that survey in 1985. And, you know, nice, simple little survey, that sort of thing they might have given me. I contacted Taunton, the Hydrographic Office, and I said, how on earth did they miss that? They said it was a single beam survey, which is what I do, with side scan, which is what I do. I said, well, how did they miss it? They said the water here was too shallow for the side scan, so they had to bring it in. I mean, I ask you. So that's what you're up against. So the problems with the official UK Hydrographic Office charts, on which all the other charts tend to be based, navionics, almost entirely based on the official Hydrographic Office charts. The problems are all, whoops, I beg your pardon. Almost all of it is to do with scale, but positioning accuracy. A lot of the original surveys, you'll understand that a chart, which is what you look at, is usually, almost always, made up of a large number of different surveys done at different times. Different in a survey and a chart, it's important to get your mind around that. A lot of the surveys, particularly in the shallower water, were done by Captain Otter, not coincidence that my boat is named Otter. Captain Otter between 1852 and 1863. They were dependent on triangulation for their positioning, and now we have GPS. Now we know exactly where we are to within, well, potentially centimetres or even millimetres, but certainly metres. In those days, there was a much greater degree of error, and particularly in the outer isles where they had more difficulty moving the horizontal datum across to the outer isles, some of the positioning accuracy was not very good. So there are some issues where the rocks are just shown in the wrong place, but most of it is that is just scale of the chart. Occasionally there are emissions, and these are some of the emissions I found. Very large number of rocks that are just missing altogether. A few rocks in the wrong place, or that have the wrong outline. Gallinac was a classic that we were looking at earlier. Wrecks in the wrong place. Now this is, again, an absolute classic. If there's a wreck near one of my surveys, I want to go and find it. One occasion I found I'd anchored right over it. I couldn't find it where it was shown on the chart, right under my boat. On one occasion, a navigation mark was put on the wrong place on the hazard, and I've even found one island shown on the chart that's actually a deep pool, and also the other way around. So, but I don't want to overstress that. I mean, they are the only two examples of that sort. Basically, the official charts are very good. They're just the wrong scale. Pilot books are very good. The Clyde Cruising Club does a brilliant job. Edward Mason, who edits them, and Jeff Crowley. The Commodore is beginning to take up the editing of them. They do a brilliant job, but what they can't do is give you any help with real-time positioning. They are a great help if you want to follow the main route into somewhere, but if you want to explore in a loch, a big Scottish loch, off-piste, they don't help you at all, and obviously at night or in poor visibility they're of very little use. So there's real limitations there. Whereas the charts that I produce, hugely larger scale, typically always at least 10 times bigger in scale, effective scale, than the Admiralty charts, and often 100 times bigger, and in one or two cases even more than that. Used with a GPS, and a huge range of software and hardware, but typically an iPad is absolutely perfect, but a laptop or a phone even. But they're made largely by me, or occasionally with help from friends. We are all unqualified, hugely enthusiastic, but it doesn't mean that we find everything all of the time. We find most things, but occasionally something gets missed. So, have we solved the problems? Well, scale, yes. Positioning accuracy, yes, because I use a GPS, whereas Captain Otter had to use triangulation. Misrepresentations and omissions, well, almost all of them, but I'm not going to guarantee that I found absolutely all of them. And relative to the sailing directions, positioning accuracy, positioning information, obviously yes, with my charts you've got your position shown actually on the chart all the time, live. Off-piste, yes, you can explore. Poor visibility, and at night, yes. And I've taken my boat, Otter, into some very narrow little anchorages in the dark, and I haven't yet come to grief. They say there are two types of sailors in Scotland, those who have hit rocks and those who are about to. I'm still in the latter category, but touch wood, long may it last. So 625-ish, I'm a bit behind schedule this year. It's the worst season ever. Normally I'd processed all the surveys, do the surveying in the summer, processing in the autumn, and always finish the processing before Christmas, except this year I haven't. Very nearly there. I shall be publishing them round about the end of the month, maybe early February. This, you're not obviously expected to read that, but it just sort of makes the point that there are a lot of them. As does this, that they're well spread around the west coast of Scotland and the outer isles. Haven't yet done any on the north coast. But these are just representations and not to scale. If you put it to scale, here the red rectangles are to scale. They represent the areas covered by my charts. My charts have a title block, they have some narrative on them, So the total area of the red rectangle is always quite a lot larger than the actual surveyed area through which you might take your boat. So the surveyed area is even smaller than these little red rectangles. So as you can see, it's a very small part of the total. The embarrassing thing is, Captain Otter surveyed the whole of the west coast, produced the basis for almost all of the currently published Admiralty charts in 11 years. I've been at it for 13 years, and that's all I've done. Could do better, I think, is the message. So anyway, that's section 1, effectively, an introduction. Now I'm going to tell you quickly how the charts are made. It's not actually terribly exciting in my opinion, but you may have questions on this, but please don't hesitate to ask them at the end. I use, start at the beginning. I need context for the survey, and the Ordnance Survey coincided with the time I started doing the surveying. They went from making their data very hard to get access to and very expensive to suddenly going completely open data. They'd encourage everybody to use it, and they'd help you if you didn't know how. So that was wonderful. I download the high water line free of charge from the Ordnance Survey, and is exactly the same high water line that the Admiralty charts use, which is wonderful. Then I use single beam depth sounder, which means it's a big term for just measure the shortest distance to the seabed. It's exactly what you do in your boat. It's no different. My depth sounder is a little bit more sophisticated, discriminating if you like. I don't pick up fish, it doesn't pick up a lot of weed, and if the bottom's a bit sort of silty, softy mud, it's quite good at getting where the actual surface is. I use a GPS which has differential correction, only 2 meter accuracy horizontally. I could use a much more sophisticated one, but I feel that's quite good enough. So I'm using technology that was state of the art for professional surveyors 25 to 30 years ago. They've moved on, they have much more sophisticated stuff now. It doesn't work where I go. It's brilliant in deep water. They can cover a lot more ground much more quickly and cheaply, and huge amount of precision. They check every little boulder, every little pebble on the seabed almost, but it doesn't work in really shallow water. And I think the reason for that is that close to the shore you've got a lot of fresh water coming in, mixing imperfectly with seawater. You've got localized heating, at least in the summer on a nice day, and you've got weed with old kelp anyway, with a lot of barnacles and mussels and occasionally limpets growing on it. All sorts of things to make a really sophisticated system not function properly. When I started, I was finding rocks that weren't on the Admiralty chart. Now I'm tending to find where their surveys overlap with mine. They're reporting things that I've reported as shallower than I am reporting them. Used to be they were always deeper, now they're shallower, and I'm having to go back and check my charts. They're always wrong. I haven't yet found one where I picked up from a recent survey in the Admiralty that they've got it right and I haven't. But there have been about 6 significant rocks so far that they've reported as being significantly shallower than they really are, for that sort of reason. It's frustrating, but it's how it is. So what I do is go up and down. It's like cutting the grass. You go up and down over the area in a systematic way on the screen. Sorry, I should explain. I do all the surveying from the rubber dinghy. I have a computer in the dinghy with the depth sounder and the GPS. On the screen, I have the outline from the Ordnance Survey of the bay, the area I want to cover. Over that, I superimpose some straight lines. The software enables me to do that. And all I have to do is to drive up and down these lines, just like cutting the grass at home. They could be anything from typically 35 meters apart to about 15 meters apart for the first pass. And that gives me all the data I need for the software then to produce a first draft of the chart. It takes off the predicted height of tide, and it produces contours which I can then look at. I look at it. If the contours are beautifully smooth, there's no sign of any wobbling in the contours, then I think, oh, that's fine. It's all absolutely perfect. It's a sandy bottom bay or muddy bottom bay, and no rock sticking up out of it. Job done. So I will then go back and I'll do a final check with the side scan, which produces a picture, an image of what's on the bottom. And if it is a smooth sandy bottom or a muddy bottom, I will see a smooth sandy bottom and a muddy bottom. If there's a rock sticking up out of it, I will see that. And if the rock is sticking up somewhere between my 35 metre apart lines, I will see it. So then I go back and I go over it and I get the shape of it in the least depth. Usually the contours on the first draft chart are not absolutely straight and smooth. Usually there is some wobbling and I have to go back. I know that's a rock, I get the shape of the rock, I get the least depth. Anything that looks a bit odd, I investigate, and I do that on an iterative basis until I think I've got everything, and then I go and do this final check. And sometimes that leads to the need for more single beam work. As I said, I use the predicted height of tide when I'm doing the survey. I have a tide gauge in the water all the time I'm out there doing the surveying. I use that in the autumn. I adjust the tidal reductions from predicted to actual. I could perfectly well use modern sophisticated GPS that gives you your vertical height to within a couple of centimetres. I wouldn't need a tide gauge or the tidal reductions, I just do it all with the GPS. But it's a lot of flaff, it's a lot of extra expense, and my method works perfectly well. So, started with Antares. I did have a go faster motor. I do 16 knots, although it used a lot of fuel. If it did, it used so much fuel that first thing I did when I got out to the Outer Hebrides was to go and find someone to fill up. So, but it would get me through tide gates, which was quite handy, and it served its purpose for a few years. Now I've got Otter, which has quite good endurance. It keeps going through rough water and doesn't go very fast, but I don't need to worry about refueling. The surveying is all done from that little dinghy at the back, which, if it's rough, I put it on the deck with this little davit thing. This is said little dinghy, 3.8 metre, fully inflatable rib with a soft inflatable bottom. If I hit a rock, I just bounce off it. And I'm looking for rocks, so it happens all the time. That's the GPS. That's the depth sounder, the ultrasonic transducer is at the bottom of that pole. There's a tie there, a stay there with a cable tie on it. If I hit a rock, the cable tie breaks, it just swivels up on that pole, and nothing's broken except the cable tie, which is easily replaced. The computer, the laptop, is under that shade, which keeps the rain off if it's raining, drizzling. It also keeps a lot of bright sunshine off, which is, of course, the main problem. Usually I'm on my own. On this occasion I was watching while my mates were doing it. Up there is the tide gauge. It's little pressure data logger. I have one on a weight on the seabed with a line and a float, another one on the boat. They both log pressure, deduct atmospheric pressure from seabed pressure, and you've got the curve of the tidal curve, and you calibrate that by reference to various public tide gauges around the west coast. Works very, very well everywhere except in the Sound of Jura, where the tides don't do what they're supposed to do. To use the charts, iPad, brilliant, cheap Android tablet, £100 tablet, couldn't be better. Obviously it needs an internal GPS. Not all iPads have internal GPSs, Wi-Fi only ones don't, but you can link them with Bluetooth to an external GPS. Lots of free navigating apps. I use Memory Map, completely free. You can get the Admiralty charts on it, as well as my charts and the Ordnance Survey walking maps, everything in one place. have it on your phone, on your iPad, and your laptop. You can have 5 versions of the same thing for no extra charge. 5 different devices for no extra charge. But a few sort of cautionary pointers here. When you're on a very large scale chart and you're going in with great confidence, probably more confidence than you should have, things do happen very quickly. Occasionally there's a tidal stream and you need to maintain boat speed through the water. If your tide and boat's going in the same direction, you can be doing a significant speed over the ground. So things do happen very quickly, and it can be awkward if one of the devices crashes. So you should always have at least 2 devices running at the same time. If you're going very slowly, when you come to anchor, you're looking for absolutely the best spot to anchor. You're just going around very, very slowly. GPSs are optimized so that they, when they're doing sort of half a knot or less, they tell you you're stationary. If you think about it, they're normally used in a car. If you're sitting at traffic lights with the handbrake on, you really don't want to be told you're going half a mile an hour forwards or backwards. So they tend to be fixed. Some GPSs are fixed, some are not. So it's just need to be aware of that and to duplicate your devices in case one of them crashes. So that's all explained in the terms and conditions and on the website. But if you're not careful, you think you know how to use electronic charts, you use them all the time on your RIN plotter. These really are different, and you really must learn to use them, monitor your progress using the pilot book, using the official charts or the navionics charts while you get used to my charts, or you will end up on the rocks, I guarantee it. An accident waiting to happen if you are not cautious. So I'll just let you read that, if you can. I get a lot of lovely messages from people, and it's very nice. I thought this was I thought this was the best. So she's left in peace. So anyway, but I get a lot of lovely messages, which is really nice. I get quite a lot of really helpful messages. Why haven't you surveyed this? Why haven't you surveyed that? Gentleman at the back has pointed me in one direction, kicked me very hard. I shall be there hopefully in April. It's really helpful to have input. If you spot anything that's wrong, for heaven's sake, tell me. But if you spot a location where you'd like a chart, then tell me. I will go and survey it. Not necessarily immediately, but it will certainly go on the list. So, how are we doing? Are we all asleep? Working up a bit of a thirst. Well, I am. So I'm now going to take you on a typical, if you charter a boat in Scotland, your boats, most of you are not based in Scotland, some very good charter companies up there, and if you want to get the feel for the place, not a bad idea to charter a boat. If you're all paying separately, 6 blokes on a boat, you can have an absolute ball in Scotland. It really doesn't cost you a lot. Alba Sailing in Dunstafnage, where I keep Otter in the summer, is, I think, one of the better charter companies, but there are others. And this is a typical itinerary for a week. Very varied scenery, obviously restaurants and pubs, lots of really remote places, Huffins, monastery on Iona. I mean, there's lots of variety. It's a great, the Corribrecken, if you want whirlpools, it's all there. So you really don't need to go a lot further. Don't think you have to travel big distances. You don't. This is 100 miles. It's perfect for a week's cruise. So we're going to start off, I think, if I remember rightly, at Sarlen here in the Sound of Mull. Sound of Mull is like the sort of M1 really, or the M25. Or it's busy. You know, you might see 3 or 4 other boats at any one time. It's that busy. So this is Sarlen. Now, this is probably the most confusing slide I'm going to show you. It's my chart superimposed on the Admiralty chart. So the back here with the big writing is the Admiralty chart. The darker blues and this lighter blue here is my chart. Thick contours, they're the thick black ones are the Admiralty ones, the thin blue ones are mine. So, one relatively small little anchorage. 5 things significantly wrong on the Admiralty chart. Solon Pier, RU in brackets, ruined. Solon Pier there is the best preserved Victorian pier I have ever seen anywhere. It's like one of those lovely railway stations where the station master, if they still exist these days, they go out and water the hanging baskets of plants every day. The fencing is immaculately painted. It's just brilliant. It is anything but ruined, and it is still used.
Has it been restored?
It's been restored, yes, it's been restored, but that probably is a different thing from ruin. This pier, however, is not shown on the Admiralty chart at all, but it is there. It's a load of old posts in places. Some of them are covered at high water, but it's a real hazard. So that is a major omission from the Admiralty chart. That's just a curiosity and a rather nice one, but that is a serious danger. There is a rock that's missing 0.5 or 8, I can't quite see, in an area where the Admiralty suggests it's 3 metres deep. So that is a rock you would hit at low water. Now here, this is, we were talking about pipelines earlier. This is one of the 2 pipelines I've surveyed. The longer dashes with little round bits at the end of the Admiralty chart symbols for the pipeline. So if you were going to anchor, you would obviously not wish to anchor too close to it. You'd go maybe 100 yards either side. If you went 100 yards to the west, you would anchor about there, which happens to be exactly where the pipeline actually is, as opposed to where it's shown on the chart. The dash, my smaller dash line, is the actual route of the pipeline. Now that's a bit of a classic. And then over here, I noticed the Admiralty shows some drying rocks, 3 of them. I noticed an awful lot of local boats moored there. They wouldn't moor their local boats when there are drying rocks. There aren't drying rocks, it's a beautiful little sandy bay. So that is extreme, but it does illustrate pretty much the full range, actually, of the things I find. Tobermory, the place you see all the pictures of with the painted houses, and the Missionish pub, not to be missed. But round here, Loch Ticus is a lovely loch with 2 entrances, and we're going to go into that in a moment. So the very first survey we did was the west entrance. The pilot book calls it the Channel of the River of Stones. Sounds like a suitable challenge. That's here off Loch Sonnet, one of the longer lochs. And this is the west entrance. This is the east entrance. Rock right in the middle of the only gap. Here, another rock right in the middle of the only gap there. The pilot book actually suggested you go through that gap. But there we are. So when we surveyed it, we found, just focus on that rock for a moment. That rock is there. It's a beautifully clear, clean channel, 4 meters deep, all the way through. No rock there at all. There is this rock, and if you're a bit impatient like me and you go in at the last of the flood, you need to go in at high-ish water because it's shallow at the south end. Don't wait for sack water, but you go in with the last of the flood. It'll be carrying onto this thing that I call the Scorpion Rock. You need to make a pretty much a right-angled turn there so as not to be swept onto it. And that's probably why somebody reported that there was actually a rock there. There wasn't, it's just the bottom end of this one. So that was a classic. This, I'm afraid, is a very old, the original version of my charts, but I'm showing you only because this is an iPad in the cockpit of Pegasus, that intermediate motorboat I had. You've got your position there, you've got a line with an arrow showing your direction of travel and your speed, and it's you can see exactly where you are and where you're heading. This is the laptop in the same boat, different occasion, and split screen, my chart, Admiralty chart. It's really good to have both on display for a bit of extra confidence. So that's those are some of the ways you can use them. So that was Locticus. Come out of there, you go to Col, where there are more bars and restaurants. There are good. There's great walking. There's some lovely sandy beaches, especially down there. You can come across to Treshnish, where the puffins hang out. Huge puffin colony. I showed you a picture of a puffin earlier. Treshnish Island. You just stand still. In fact, if you stand still with the legs a little bit apart, just stand watching the scenery, chances are a puffin will just wander between your legs. I mean, they are that tame. It's extraordinary. Not to be missed. And then you come through, this is the island of Ulva, the Ulva Sound. Well, it's like winning your spurs, really. Everybody who wants to call himself a serious West Coast yachtsman has to take his own boat through the Ulva Sound. So, let's do that. This is the Admiralty chart of it. You come in over here somewhere, through that channel, you go through there, you come down. Whoops, then it gets a bit tricky, a bit shallow here, an awful lot of rocks. And then you come out, a bit shallow there, but it's at least you're smooth, and then you come out this side. So, this is my chart of the same area. We're going to look at that in a bit more detail. I'll start over this side. The Admiralty chart, we come in through here. Looks a bit dodgy there, and through that gap, well, actually, dead simple, really straightforward, nice, clean, deep channel down there. No problem at all there, that's easy. You come through here, there are a few moored boats, you have to avoid them, but you don't need a chart for that. Then there's this thing, which is called the Potato Rock. It's rather awkwardly positioned, it's drying 0.2 of a metre, and these other little rocks around it. It's not totally obvious how you tackle that, but the pilot book says you go north of that and south of that through that little gap. Well, that is indeed what you do. There is a bit of deeper water there. It is narrow, but at least with this chart, little red dot will show you exactly where you are, and you can feel your way north of that. You'll probably have enough height of tide to take you over that one, and probably over this one too, but it's more comforting if you go through the really narrow bit, which I often do in my boats. I also have a sailing boat with quite a deep keel, over 2 metre draft. I've taken that through there regularly as well. So you come through this really narrow bit. Pontoons, water, electricity, really good facilities here for visitors. And that was the Ulva Sound. Piece of cake, really, when you've got a decent scale chart. I'm just showing you this. This is Google Earth. One of the things you can do with my charts, it's a great thing to do in the winter. Wet weather, the sort we had at the beginning of last week. You don't want to go out, it's horrible. You put some charts on the screen. You can open my charts in Google Earth. You need a different version, but you can download it from my website, KMZ version. And you superimpose it on Google Earth. You just go to File, Open, and click on the relevant chart name. Superimpose it, and then you add transparency. And so you can see the shorelines coinciding, and you can see the waters. Occasionally you can see sandy bottom bits. That's a moored boat. And you can vary with a slider, you can vary the transparency more or less as you look at it, and you don't have to take your hand off the slider, it just varies it in real time as you move it. Absolutely fantastic toy. These dark lines are the shoreline, okay, they're the Ordnance Survey ones, superimposed on the Google Earth image. It gives you a really good feel, helps your confidence enormously, and it's fun way of spending a wet winter evening. There's the slider, transparency slider is there, so you go to File, Open, you open my chart, coincide with where you're looking on Google Earth, and the name of the chart appears there, and then you use the slider to vary the transparency. Great fun. Google Earth, we come out here next to Inchkenneth. I think this penultimate slide I'm going to show you. It's an extraordinary place. There's this weird house. it's actually owned by somebody who is a neighbour of ours. I've come today by train because they're doing engineering works on my normal line. I come from Royston in Hertfordshire, which is about 8 miles from where we live. I met a guy who was doing up this house, and I got chatting, and I said, "You don't come from around here, do you?" He said, "No, I come from Royston." he brought all his building materials up, used the same builder's merchant we used. This house was owned by the Mitfords, and Unity spent the war there. That was her bedroom. I've checked out Unity Mitford's bedroom. No, Hitler would not have been impressed, but anyway. It still has the grand piano, and it's probably a lot nicer now that it's been done up than it was when I was there. The point, though, of showing you this slide is this is the Admiralty chart. So these red dashed lines are the usable routes in and out. And you can actually literally follow them. So that looks a bit close to the reef, but it's fine. That's the route you take. What about this one? Now I can show you several examples like that where the Admiralty show you a proper solid drying reef. You could actually take a boat through it. There's another one at Ardbeg, which is a great little route. See boats popping out of the cliffside and they're going through a channel like this. There's the channel, and it's a really good channel. It starts at 10 metres deep. Okay, it gets a bit shallow here, but it's perfectly usable. Look at that. How did they miss that? Probably a young surveyor, probably a midshipman, probably had a lot of port for lunch. We're running a bit late. We haven't got time to go and look there. We'll just show it all as reef. I mentioned the surveys. The MCA, Maritime Coast Guard Agency, have commissioned all the home water surveys, and they've done a lot in the last few years. All these A areas are 2011, 2012, full seabed coverage, really good detail. Helps fishermen, I suppose, might help the old submarine, not that I guess many mosey around here. But look at the places we want to go. C is 1857 to 1865. That's no good, is it? Hopeless. B is 1907, that's all 1907. So all places that are of interest to us have not been resurveyed since Captain Otter was busy. And all the Admiralty charts, well, we still have paper charts, they all carry a diagram like this, which is really fun to look at. And McKinnon's Cave, Crag Egg Bay, which is a lovely, really sheltered, or fairly sheltered anchorage, but fantastic views. Come down through the Sound of Iona, the monastery on Iona, and the Ross of Mile with a completely different geology, red, pink granite, lovely sandy beaches on the south side, just a stunning area, Tinker's Hole, which is sounds better than it really is. Everybody wants to go there. I don't know why, but it's one of those places you have to visit. We come through here, through the Corrie Vrecken, where the tides run at 8 knots and there are big whirlpools. And, if you want to, you don't have to, you can just go back up there. And then various other bits and pieces here. Last one I'm going to show you is Loch Don. Now, I was an East Coast sailor. I guess some of you are East Coast sailors. You'll be very at home in Loch Don. It's one of the very few places, just like an East Coast river. Oops, I beg your pardon. I beg pardon there. This is Crag Egg, sorry. I will just quickly talk through this one. This is the current Admiralty chart. This is Captain Otter's original chart. You can see it's got a lot more detail than the current one and a lot more precision on the shoreline. And this precision is pretty accurate, a pretty accurate representation of what is actually there. Not always quite in the right place, but it's the right shape. This is my chart. So you can see, for example, if your normal anchorage is there, on this chart, would you actually take your boat through to there? How would you do it? Through that dot, through there, it doesn't look very nice. We'll come in here, we go through there. Doesn't really look very enticing. On Captain Otter's chart, you probably would go through there, or you come down through here. And on my chart, you do exactly the same. So I think Captain Otter and I could have been quite good mates. I don't know what these. I would have looked up to him anyway. Amazing what they did. in those days, but the Admiralty, I'm afraid, have taken too many shortcuts and have served us up with, I wouldn't say rubbish, it's better than nothing, but it's not good enough. This is detail of my chart. 3.2 metre there, that's another classic. That was shown as 10 metres on the Admiralty chart. I don't suppose many of us have boats 3.3 metre draft, but if you happen to have a super yacht and take it in there, you might get a bit of a shock. So yes, now I will show you Loch Don, and these are my tracks going in and out of Loch Don. Well, I should go back to school really, shouldn't I? I obviously can't navigate. It must have been at high water. Nobody ever went to Loch Don. I said, what a lovely place it is. Up here you see a lot of wading birds, you see seals, you see everything, a huge variety of stuff. This is all mud, flat mud. It's beautiful if you're into looking at feathered birds and seals and things, it's stunning. But nobody ever went to them, so which ran aground? Well, you can see why. So that's the channel, big boulders up there. This wiggle here was when I saw a sea eagle perched on that rock, and I went back to take a photograph. Yeah, see them too. And just for good measure, I put some extra contours on this one. These are 1.5 metre contours. Normal contours are 1 metre apart, just to show you where the really deepest bit is if you want to cheat the tide and push it to the limits. So that's all I want to say. Wow. Very happy to take any questions. Sir?
I'm a big fan of Antares charts, and I did take Bethamar into Loch Don not 3-4 months ago. And it's worth noting that that's where the original Mull ferry went from, I believe.
Yes, although the outer bit of Loch Don.
Yeah. And I have enough confidence to go in there.
It used to go to there, so it lived fairly safely.
Yeah, the word confidence you've used several times, and that's what this has given me.
Yeah.
Taking my boat places.
Phil has the most beautiful motor yacht. Stunning.
No, satellite positions on our instruments are so accurate now. I mean, when I'm using Navionics or Admiralty or anything else, I always leave a very, very large margin of error. I mean, not because of the instrument, but because of the chart.
Yeah.
Is there a margin of error that you think we should use using yours? I mean, should we assume it's accurate, say, to a 5 metre radius? I mean, you've got rocks very close together that we might be going through.
Well,
10 metres or
I mentioned early on that you should learn how to use them. Teach yourself, try out, and you'll get the feel of it. I mean, if there's any tide running, then you want to leave a huge margin, 20 metres, huge margin. If there's no tide, there's no wind, then you'll edge very close, very slowly up to something and berth alongside a rock in the dark. Why not? I do it. There are places where you can put the fender boards out. You literally go alongside a rock, and you can do it in the dark. Generally, the accuracy is very good. A couple of metres is the worst case. Usually better. You walk along a pontoon. I've charted quite a few pontoons. Okay, they tend to move, but some of them with posts. You walk along and you'll just put your blinkers on and just use your iPad to walk along the pontoon. You probably won't fall into the water. Not sure you should try. It tends to be very good. And it's not me, it's the kit, it's great. But you just want to treat it carefully, and you can't always keep your boat in the right place. And if you are going slowly, the GPS might freeze, and that's scary. It does happen. Yes.
What led you to choose 35 metres as your line interval?
Trial and error. I've tried 100 metres, I've tried 50 metres, I've tried 20 metres, 25 metres, and I do in fact vary it. But it depends a lot on the circumstances, and just through trial and error, I find that 35 for a place that I think is going to be simple, and sometimes I'm wrong, is a good place to start. It gives you enough resolution to spot most things, most rocky outcrops. You catch a bit of it, not all. in Loch Moidart, I got the shock of my life. There's an area that was 10 metres deep, and I'd shown it all as 10 metres deep. I went along with the side scan. There's a great rock. I could almost touch it. When I looked through the water, I could see it, and it was really compact, no more than about 20 feet in diameter, coming up from 10 metres deep. It's just a great pinnacle of rock. I missed that by doing my lines, and the side scan picked it up.
Typically, how long do you spend in a bay doing a wonderful chart?
Well, it depends.
It depends, yes.
I've shortest time, I suppose, is really small, really simple one, 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
But not Moidart, I mean, 2 weeks probably. It was five different occasions. Put it all together, maybe 10 working days probably. It just depends on the complexity and the area.
Yes.
So I try not to do really big areas. I do some really simple looking bays, because they tend to be quite popular, especially if they're sandy. And if there are 3 or 4 boats in there already, and you're on the 5th boat, gosh, where am I going to put my hook down? They've all got the best spots. I need to know where the edge really is. And so it helps you to spot where you can put your hook down and not end up on the rocks.
Thank you.
Question,
yes.
A question from the floor.
Right.
Simon Jackson, in the near future, where the HOs limit further their works, a key issue is updating and changes. Do you spend any time revisiting surveys, and if not, how do you see your work having ongoing credibility?
I'm not sure that the Hydrographic Office is necessarily going to limit its work. It's going to stop publishing paper charts, which is a serious issue for me, but not for everybody. They're trying to do this comprehensive seabed coverage. They're not going to go inside the 2 metre line, 2 metre contour, as far as I know. But try to answer the question, the great thing about Scotland is most of it's rocky. The seabed doesn't change. You do it once, you do it well, and it's done forever. There are some sandy bits. Loch Moidart, for example, long loch, sandy bottom, channel going diagonally across the sandy bit, well in. Last surveyed in 1855 or something. I thought that's bound to have moved. It hadn't moved at all. Exactly the same position, exactly the same depth. Because it's well protected from gales, from the ocean swell. There are 1 or 2 places, Loch Morra, which would be of interest to trader sailors. It's a great place to launch a trader sailor. It's a bit like one of those lovely Brittany rivers with trees all around, but acres of sand, really shallow. And there the channel does move quite dramatically. But there are very few examples like that in Scotland. And so I do go back, and it irritates me like mad that I have to go back. And it's to check these official surveys, MCA surveys, where they say something is shallower than I say it is. And I have to go back and check. I can't not really. So that's how I try to obtain credibility. I've just finished yesterday a chart that will be published in the next 2 or 3 weeks in Loch Carron, bottom of the Inner Sound from Clopton, where I say it's 3.2 metres, the Admiralty say it's 1.8. It's quite a difference. And I've been back, I haven't died from it, but I've used all my gadgets, I've been over it time after time. It's 3.2. And I asked because I know the people at Taunton very well, and there was good 3G there, 4G, 5G, whatever it is, I called them up and I said, there's an error on your surveys here. Can you send the survey through? They did. And there were just 2 little pings that produced this phantom depth. To get really good accuracy, in difficult inshore places where there might be traffic, 7 points of contact with each square metre of seabed. And they had about that density of contact here. 2 out of the 7 were shallower than, but they couldn't send the surveyor back to check, so they had to show the unduly shallow depth, and I've done that several times, I'm afraid. Sorry,
Well,
time's
thank
up.
you very much. We have time for a few more questions after dinner to save the kitchens spoiling the food. I think we ought to wind up now for this session. And how satisfying to see someone able to see an opportunity and then do something about it. Bob, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Barry. On behalf of the Royal Institute of Navigation, I'd like to thank the Little Ship Club for hosting us this evening. We've been laying on talks for you for a number of years, and I hope we'll be back more or less the same time next year with another speaker. Bob, thank you very much for that fantastic talk. I have, as you know, used your charts in Scotland. And last year we went into RSA, which is the larger red blob above Mull, which was on the chart, where the Admiralty say there's a bar with, I think, less than a metre all the way across. And we decided to be quite brave and go in with about a metre over after low water.
Gap's about that wide.
And we got through this gap, and we had a minimum depth actually of 4.5 metres as we went through. So the next morning when we were coming out, we were a bit braver, and we went not long after low water and got straight through, showing a minimum of 4 metres. And of course outside there were a number of yachts at anchor waiting to come in, none of them brave enough to do it, although one did off your charts, and I think they moved fairly quickly. So if you have Bob's charts and you're going to Scotland, you'll be able to do things that you wouldn't be able to do using the Admiralty charts. Thank you very much. Thank you.
To make your way into the dining room where dinner will be served.
Great. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Terrific.
Yes. Those angels came through.
Right.
Mr. Paul.
And you just don't know what to expect.